I love my OCs.
I love refrigerators.
I posted drawings of these guys before, and I even made a voiceover style video about Tyrion a few months ago, but it's been years since I've talked about the main cast or the world building, and I feel like those old videos, aside from being poor in quality, are also pretty outdated by this point. World building has stayed similar enough, but in terms of the characters themselves, I've made a lot of changes in the past few years alone, and I don't remember ever introducing them properly anyway. So this video will be just that, a brief look into the main 5 of the Destiny Alduran cast. There is one major reason why I'm focusing on the 5 in this video. They're the ones I've had for the longest, so I have more to say on them that I don't feel would change much anytime soon. I would have included Tristan, as I consider him part of the main 6, but I don't have a lot on his personality or backstory yet. They might end up with their own dedicated video somewhere down the line. To better understand a lot of my characters' stories, I feel like it's important to have at least a little familiarity with the elements of their world. More specifically, magic for this case. There are really 4 different magic systems which coexist in Destiny. Elemental magic, which is generally unable to be used in spellcasting, save for artificial means, but that's a topic for a different video, and affects the environment and the biology of certain creatures. Basic magic, which is the most commonly used among humanoid species. Celestial magic, which are sentient, deity-like magics. And Hellfire, which is basically just the magic type that breaks all the rules. Each of them have an effect on my characters in different ways, though the most obvious are basic and celestial magic, as 4 of the 5 are the destined users of the celestial magics themselves. There are 3 types of basic magic: dark, dual, and light. Dark magic is particularly good at spells which are more variable or have some dependence on the environment around the caster, as it has a high awareness and adaptability. It is this very adaptability, however, that can make it a little tricky to control at times. Light magic, on the other hand, is better for repetitive, formulaic spells, which can make it easy to cast with, yet its lack of awareness means that the caster has to do a lot of the analysis themselves instead of working alongside their magic. Dual magic is the perfect fusion of the two, cancelling out what one has advantage of over the other and blending the traits of its parent types. All 3 magics are merely neutral tools, with no sentience, no sorts of agenda, and no way to really affect their users at their core the way that, say, animus magic from Wings of Fire can. However, many people still believe that dark magic was brought by satanic forces and light was a gift from the heavens, a belief which mostly stemmed from ignorance on how these magic types worked. While these ideas are no longer that widely accepted, many still hold true that dark is evil and light is pure, leading to continuing discrimination against dark mages and perpetuating the demonization of the Shadow Beasts, a magical species made entirely of dark magic. Aside from what I've already mentioned, I don't have much on the celestial magics yet. I still need to flesh out their personalities and if they have specialty powers or not. I don't think they will, because obviously, they're basically gods in this world. I don't see a point in that. Who knows? That will be for future me to decide. So who are the main 5? We start with Didi, my very first OC. Half-demon holder of the magic eclipse, Didi believed for a long time she was actually powerless. Her magic had awakened in her much too young and deactivated itself for a time in order to protect her from its own sheer power. In addition, she's had to hide her demon-like features in order to blend in with humans, something her mother did as well and still does to this day. Her father had given her a necklace similar to her mother's that was enchanted for that very purpose. She was best friends with Ash since they were in an elementary school, the two bonding over shared interests and sticking together because both of them were too timid in middle school to put themselves out there to make new friends. Plus, they both knew that middle schoolers are assholes more often than not, especially towards the quote-unquote weird kids, so they knew it wouldn't have been worth their time anyway. I'm totally not projecting, don't worry about it. In high school, freshman year to be precise, she met Callie and almost befriended her, but their budding acquaintanceship was soon ruined by a random Shadow Beast attacking her to siphon some of her magic, since Shadow Beasts can use dark magic as an energy source of sorts. Didi, of course, tried to defend herself, and her magic reactivated in the process, but she was too inexperienced to do much other than form weak shields on pure impulse, so Callie stepped in and saved her. Unfortunately, Callie could sense that Didi's magic was celestial, and since she believed the two were destined to be enemies, she basically made it her life's mission to antagonize her any chance she got and never let Didi become more powerful than her. Spoiler, that doesn't work, but she sure as hell tries. The next several years are something of a roller coaster for her, especially in regards to magic-related nonsense. Eclipse is one of 2 celestial magics that were inherited, so his power grew with each new user, which on one hand is good because it means that Didi has ended up with a lot of raw strength and Eclipse's cautious nature kept her from accidentally causing a lot of damage, but on the other hand, magical strength is very much a double-edged sword. I mean, he's so powerful that he had to shut down for over a decade in the first place. This becomes apparent pretty early on. Not a year after reawakening her magic, Didi gets overpowered so badly it nearly kills her, and the only way Eclipse was able to save her life was through a hasty immortality spell in his last moments of having even a shred of stability. Even still, the overpower doesn't leave either of them unscathed. Eclipse's power is completely unusable for days afterwards, and he struggles to communicate with his user or even retain any information at that time, to the point that, once he's finally stable again, he has no memory of the days he spent out of commission. Things on Dee Dee's end are still a little up in the air. I have plenty of ideas, but aside from one thing, I don't know what will stay canon. So just know that this whole incident was, not good. Dee Dee herself is a pretty carefree type of gal, especially the older she gets. She's not reckless by any means, and she still isn't the most trusting towards strangers and whatnot, but she's put a lot of work into not letting her anxiety get the better of her, and it's been paying off. Her confidence as an adult is much higher than that of her teenage self, something which can be shown simply through how comfortable she is expressing herself now, no longer needing to hide her gender or her species, while also no longer worried that she was presenting too masculine, quote-unquote, considering the fact that she's a trans woman. Part of it is because she feels a lot safer now that she's pretty knowledgeable about her magic. She's able to control her power and do pretty much whatever she wants with it, so she's not too worried about being put in physical danger, as she can escape a lot of tricky situations through just magic. Still, she prefers not to solve problems through confrontation, instead opting to compromise or simply let the issue go in order to avoid a fight. This is easier with some people than others, even though it's pretty difficult to truly piss her off. On to Nightshade, the character who I would argue has diverged the most from her origins, which is a little ironic considering she's the first character to my memory who was entirely original. For those who don't know, Dee Dee and Ash were originally AU versions of Beyblade Burst characters, Dinah and Shu respectively. Callie was a personification of the mean popular girl stereotype, and Theo was the tailor from Terraria for all of 2 months. Nightshade was a self-insert for even briefer time than Theo was a Terraria OC. The problem was that I had so many ideas for what to do with her character, none of which aligned with the type of person I was at the time, so the self-insert thing lasted like a week maybe before I gave up trying to bash her personality into the mold of myself and just let her be her own character. From there, she progressively evolved from just Dee Dee's cool best friend to having her own backstory, cliché as it may be, and eventually becoming a key part of the prophecy once I got down to figuring out the lore. The story so far, details subject to change, is that Nightshade is the princess of the Shadow Realm and had fled because her mother was pretty abusive, whereupon she met Dee Dee and Ash, learned of her potential involvement in the Great Prophecy by way of Callie arbitrarily deciding she hated her, and all the while grew closer with the woman who would later on become her wife. Speaking of which, actually, I feel it's important to go over the relationship between Dee Dee, Ash, and Nightshade. So, Dee Dee's poly, but didn't quite realize it until a while after getting engaged to Nightshade, but Nightshade was okay with an open relationship, especially since the other person whom Dee Dee loved happened to be her best friend. Dee Dee and Nightshade are married, and even though Dee Dee and Ash are not, they're still dating. Ash and Nightshade don't really consider each other partners in the same way either of them would with Dee Dee, as they don't share much romantic attraction between each other, but they still technically are? I don't know, it's confusing. Problems of being a multi-shipper with your own OCs, I guess. Back to plot, Nightshade is the only member of the Prophecy who does not have celestial magic. She has dual instead, but her power is strong enough to rival the celestial users, in part thanks to her dedication to support her wife. Callie would pick fights with the two of them a lot in high school, and while both of them were pretty strong, Callie was stronger and more knowledgeable, so they had to rely on each other a lot in order to not get absolutely destroyed. Nightshade very much so picks up the slack when it comes to fighting. She likes to get in there and barrage the enemy until they're too worn down to fight. Even in verbal confrontations, she's very steadfast, refusing to back down if she really believes in what she's arguing. She doesn't particularly like fighting, but she's not as people-pleasing as Dee Dee. Generally, Nightshade comes off as the tired mom friend of the group. She's often very low energy, something which has only gotten worse as she's moved into her adult years, but she's responsible and does what she can to ensure that those she loves are safe and happy. She doesn't let herself relax as much as she knows she should, and even in downtime she has to be doing something lest the boredom drive her insane. She's very much the type to pick up a hobby only to drop it a month later because she got bored of it, especially if it's something she's doing on her own. The only thing that can get her to sit down and chill for hours at a time is a really good book or watching TV with her wife, otherwise she's got to be active in some way or another. Callie is quite the character. Her whole shtick has been the subversion of the light good, darkness bad trope you see in fantasy a lot, with her being somewhat of a believer in that very trope. She, along with most of the demigods, was raised to believe that dark magic was a corrupting force, that demons and shadow beasts were evil creatures at their core, that humans would one day need to be saved from the forces of evil, and that the Great Prophecy foretold that the celestial magics would reunite so that Alpha, the power that had been in possession of the royal family for generations, would either use the other magics somehow or destroy them in order to save the Five Realms. The only reason she left the Light Realm in the first place was because of the prophecy. Despite how isolated the realm is, they were still able to learn that Eclipse had been inherited by his destined user, so Callie was sent to one day fulfill her own destiny. As you can probably imagine, she's a very egocentric person, and always has been. She started out as basically the mean girl archetype given name, though her way of combating the protagonist was a lot less petty and a lot more violent. Younger her never set out to kill Dee Dee or anything like that, but she has made it clear what she thought their roles were, and anytime Dee Dee or Nightshade posed a threat to her, even if it was only a perceived threat, she would try and fix the issue through fighting. She has realized that maybe that was not the most sensible way to go about things, but she was only 14 at the time, so, you know. Nowadays, Callie's a lot more reserved and a lot more conflicted about her goals. Her time spent in this realm has shown her that things aren't as black and white as she believed, but there's still a large part of her that clings onto the idea that she's some sort of savior meant to rid the world of evil, something which her magic perpetuates no matter how strong Callie's doubts on the whole thing are. As self-centered as Callie can be, Alpha is so much worse. She justifies her ego with the fact that she's both the oldest and most powerful magic in Destiny, that she's been the magic of demigod royalty for millennia, and that she firmly believes the prophecy's foretelling of the celestial magic's reunion is supposed to be in the form of some great battle in which she emerges victorious, triumphing over the other magics and ridding the world of darkness or whatever. Since Callie's whole life and identity has revolved around her magic and her supposed role in the prophecy, it's really hard for her to break away from what she's been taught and accept the truth, even though a part of her knows Alpha and the other demigods are wrong. Okay, back to the silly guys. As mentioned before, Ash was originally an AU version of Shu Kurenai, something which probably shows in his design, but definitely not in his personality. Ash's arc is pretty similar to his partner's, going from awkward and shy to more outgoing and confident, although those traits are stronger in him than in her. When in his best mood, he's flamboyant and energetic, often to the point of annoyance for certain people. And even when he's at his worst, he does everything in his power to not bring down those around him. He can be a little bit of a people pleaser, especially towards those he's super close with, and his love language is doing and making things for others. As for plot, I admittedly don't have much. For the most part, he's a support side character. Ironically enough for a destined celestial magic user, he never really had an interest in magic, and no matter how hard he tried to force himself to get invested in experimenting with spellcasting or learning about magic structure like Dee Dee, he just couldn't. He'll use his magic, because why wouldn't he, but more as a tool to help him in day-to-day life rather than something to be continuously pushing to its limits to test its potential. It being celestial magic, Sunfire is pretty strong, though Ash's underusage of it has made it easily the weakest of the four. His brother Theo has a lot more to him, I think, at least in terms of plot. You see, Theo actually has a backstory. Little baby Theodore lived a comfortable, happy life until him and his parents got into a car wreck when he was 6, one that ended up killing all 3 of them. Of course, you can't let a child of Destiny stay dead for long, so Reaper was able to conduct a last-minute revival. Last minute because it didn't know that Theo had died until the last minute for reasons I have yet to come up with, but already know boiled down to magic bullshit. Because it was so late, Theo was left with a fractured soul, which basically means that it's very, very easy for him to re-die, and that any spells which would have an effect on the soul, like immortality or intense enough healing, would instead kill him. Souls in this world are just a being's life force, and they're stronger the younger and healthier that creature is, so you can probably guess from that why his parents couldn't be revived as well. He spent a few years as a homeless, undead orphan boy, terrified of being seen by other people, in part because he's undead, and in part because of the giant scar in his face that couldn't be healed for aforementioned reasons. The only thing he trusted was his magic, who did what it could to help him survive and make the most of the situation. It had urged him to at least try to find some place to go to with other human beings who will help them better than a socially ignorant magic deity ever could, but poor traumatized Theo vehemently refused, and Reaper didn't really know what to do in response, so it just went along with it. He does eventually get caught stealing food or something and ends up in an orphanage before being adopted by Ash's family, and with them, he learns to open up again and makes very meaningful connections with his new family and with new friends. Much like Dee Dee, who has kind of become his mentor, Theo is very interested in strengthening his power, but he has to be a lot more cautious about it thanks to the whole fractured soul thing. He's particularly interested in studying spells that affect the soul, be they healing spells or revival spells, in the hopes to find some way of solving or circumventing that previously mentioned issue. That way he can maybe have a normal rest of his life without worry that a strong enough panic attack would literally kill him. As you may be able to tell from some of the elements of these characters, much of what I've come up with for these guys was from many, many years ago, so a large amount of the story is still in the progress of being rethought. I'm in the process of planning a more plot-centric AU for it that will one day become either a book or a webcomic, depending on which will end up working better for me. I think writing a book would be much easier, but I'm drawn to creating a comic so I can show off my designs and ideas for the visuals of magic a little better. What do you guys think? Should I stick to just writing about them, or should I push myself to learn how to make comics so I can put my brain blorbos on the interwebs for all to see? Either way, I'll be pouring a lot more time and work into these guys and their stories, so stay tuned if you want to hear more of me yapping, whether it's about them or other stuff like self-imposed art challenges. With that, I've got more work to do.